Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to completely unpack the incredible, massive transformations that hit India from the 11th right through to the 17th centuries. We're going to break down some really complex history from this chapter into clear visual themes, so you can perfectly grasp how the political and social map of the subcontinent was basically rewritten.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll rethink the medieval era, map out shifting political lines, look at the brutal yet cultured conquerors, check out how they ran these massive empires, explore everyday economic resilience, and finally, listen to the echoes of the past.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Rethinking India's Medieval Era. First things first, we really need to toss out what we think we know about the word medieval. When most of us hear medieval, we immediately picture the European Dark Ages, right? A total pause in progress. But in the Indian context, spanning roughly the 11th to the 17th centuries, it was actually the complete opposite. It wasn't a dark age at all. It was an era of just explosive change, intense cultural mixing, and crazy shifting borders. Let's actually anchor ourselves with a few pivotal dates to really visualize this timeline. Think 1206, the Delhi Sultanate kicks off. Then down south in 1336, the Vijayanagara Empire is born. Fast forward to 1526, and Babur establishes the monumental Mughal Empire. And you can literally see the architectural legacy they left behind. Looking at the Qutub Minar complex in Delhi, it's clear these weren't just everyday buildings. They were massive, physical stamps of authority, cementing new power right into the stone. Moving right into Section 2, a shifting political map. We're going to look at the crazy wave of Central Asian invasions that basically redrew the entire region. Starting in the 11th century, it was like the floodgates opened. Turkic and Afghan conquerors poured over the Hindu Kush mountains. Why? Well, they were chasing India's legendary wealth, plain and simple. And with them, they brought intense warfare, totally new cultures, and some incredibly violent power struggles. To put that volatility into perspective, almost 2 out of 3 sultans in Delhi grabbed the throne by literally eliminating the guy before them. Because of all that backstabbing, the average reign was just 9 years. Imagine that. But even with those incredibly short reigns, the sheer audacity of these rulers is mind-blowing. Take Alauddin Khilji. He minted coins calling himself Sikandar Sani, which literally translates to the Second Alexander. Talk about confidence. Despite constant looming threats to their lives, they honestly saw themselves as global conquerors. Which brings us to Section 3, Conquerors, Culture, and Brutality. We definitely can't just box these rulers in as simple warriors. They were huge, walking paradoxes. Take Babur, the guy who founded the Mughal Empire. In his own memoirs, the Baburnama, he comes across as this incredibly cultured intellectual. He loved poetry, studied architecture, and obsessed over local birds and flowers. But, and it's a huge but, he was also a terrifying conqueror who slaughtered entire populations and literally built towers out of skulls. It is a completely jarring historical contrast. All right, on to Section 4, Administrating the New Empires. Once the dust settled from all that conquering, how on earth did they actually govern these colossal new territories day to day? Well, Akbar figured out an absolutely genius workaround called the Mansabdari system. It was a brilliant 3-step process. First, he'd assign a rank, or mansab, to an officer. Second, that officer had to maintain a very specific number of troops, horses, and elephants based on their rank. Third, instead of paying them cash from the central treasury, he gave them jagirs, basically land assignments, to collect their own revenue. It was a total game changer. It let Akbar raise a giant army overnight without going bankrupt trying to pay a standing military. And because that system was so efficient, the empire became wealthy beyond belief. The sultans and the elite lived these incredibly lavish lives, draped in fine clothes and jewels, hanging out in some of the most stunning palaces ever built. That takes us to Section 5, Economic and Social Resilience. While kings were busy fighting wars and building palaces, what were the everyday people doing? How did they manage to survive and actually thrive? Well, everyday merchants were actually super innovative. Have you ever heard of a hundi? It was essentially an early version of a wire transfer. You write down an instruction to pay someone, and boom, money moves without having to haul bags of heavy coins across dangerous roads. Trade completely boomed across borders, totally independently of the kings and sultans. And then you have something like the breathtaking landscape of Hampi, down in the Vijayanagara Empire. This highlights another massive anchor for everyday folks during all this chaos, the local temple. Because temples were way more than just places to pray. They were the literal economic engines for their communities. We're talking bustling markets. Temple managers used donations to build vital irrigation systems and water tanks. They housed pilgrims. They even acted like banks, loaning money to merchants to fund massive trade ventures. And amidst all the crazy political chaos at the very top, you had powerful grassroots spiritual movements stepping up. Take Sikhism, for example. The Guru Granth Sahib championed these profound ideas of equality, justice, and compassion. Quotes like, "Truth is high, but higher still is truthful living," really gave everyday citizens a strong moral compass to navigate a super unpredictable world. Finally, Section 6, Echoes of the Past. How do we actually process all of this complex and, often brutal history today?
The big takeaway from this chapter is that we have to look at the darker parts of history neutrally. We learn the facts and we absolutely respect the victims of ancient atrocities, but it is so important to remember that nobody alive today bears responsibility for violence committed by rulers hundreds of years ago. We study this history to understand our world, not to carry ancient guilt.
And honestly, those ancient empires faded anyway. Just listen to the haunting final words of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. He wrote, "I came alone and am going away alone. I was helpless in life and I am departing helpless." It's a stark reminder. Despite having absolute, terrifying power, in the end, even the mightiest empires are impermanent.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. The conquerors and their massive empires are long gone, turned to dust. But what about the economic ingenuity and social resilience of the everyday people? How does that grassroots spirit continue to inspire us right now?
Keep that in the back of your mind as you study this chapter. If you found this explainer helpful for breaking everything down and you really want to master this history, definitely go grab our comprehensive study bundles from the link in the description below. Thanks so much for hanging out and learning with me today, and I'll catch you next time.